The last sound Ethan remembered clearly was the shattering of glass and the long, pitiless scream of metal. Then, like a door slammed on a windy night, the world went quiet. He woke in a hospital where machines blinked like patient constellations, and the nurse's lips moved, but carried no sound. The doctor wrote on a whiteboard, "Car accident, you're alive. Bilateral hearing loss likely permanent." Ethan nodded because nodding was easy, breathing was harder. The silence pressed on him, heavy and absolute, as if the whole city had stepped outside for air and forgot to come back. Before the accident, Ethan mixed sound for indie bands in crowded clubs, turning loose melodies into living rooms where strangers felt like family. He could take a raw vocal and cradle it until it sounded like confession and courage at the same time. He loved the way a bass line could steady someone's heartbeat, the way a chorus could lift tired shoulders. He lived by his ears, now he lived by subtitles. Physical therapy taught him to balance. A counselor taught him to grieve what he'd lost without hating what remained. Friends visited with flowers and fragile smiles. His mother, a kindergarten teacher with laugh lines etched in kindness, came every evening with soup. On the third night, she slid a card under his palm, her finger tapping the ink as if the sentence could be persuaded to speak. He read the words twice before they settled. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart has imagined what God has prepared for those who love Him. He wanted to fling the card against the sterile wall. Instead, he tucked it into the drawer beside the hospital bed and prayed the first honest prayer he'd prayed since childhood. "I don't know how to love you right now." He went home to an apartment that remembered sound guitars on stands, a shelf of battered vinyls, a mixing board that sat like a quiet animal waiting to be fed. He sold the monitors and the outboard gear, told himself it was practical, and pretended the ache in his chest was hunger. The settlement money covered rent, but not purpose. He took a job cataloging audio files for a small production studio, the kind of work that feels like dusting a museum where you were not allowed to touch anything. On Sunday mornings, he slept. He told friends he was fine. He told himself silence would eventually loosen its grip, that the right distraction would teach him to not notice. But grief is a tide that comes back for what it left. One afternoon in early spring, Ethan wandered into a park where a crowd had formed around a busker. The man wasn't playing an instrument, he was signing a song. A portable speaker vibrated faintly under his bare feet, and as his hands curved the air, people swayed. Ethan stood at the edge, lips parted, watching choreography he didn't know, a lyric he couldn't hear. The busker finished, bowed, and held up a cardboard sign that read, "Deaf Worship Leader. Sunday Night's Cornerstone Church." Ethan stared at the sign a long time, then walked away. At the crosswalk he turned back, as if tugged by a string. He took a photo of the sign, knowing that courage sometimes arrives later than invitation. The following Sunday, dusk bruised the sky as he stood outside Cornerstone, a brick church where vines had made a home and a hand-lettered banner announced, "All are welcome." Really, he wondered if they meant it. He wondered if God meant it. Inside, an usher with kind eyes and a silver beard handed him a program and, seeing the hearing aids behind his ears, pointed to rows near the front, marked ASL and captions. A large screen displayed the words of the songs. A deaf choir stood to the side, their hands ready. The band began. He felt it before he saw it. Vibration traveled through the floor and up his bones like a polite earthquake. On the screen, lyrics spilled in crisp white. "I will sing of the goodness of God." The choir signed in a language of motion and meaning. Faces lit with something that looked like freedom. A woman in a green sweater signed the same line and then touched her chest, a gesture like reclaiming her own heartbeat. Ethan didn't understand all of it, but he understood that joy has a shape. During the message, the pastor signed and spoke while a second interpreter stood for the hearing. The text was from 1 Corinthians to 2:9, the same verse in his drawer. The pastor didn't argue with the silence. He didn't promise easy endings. He said, "Heaven is not escapism. It is the sure future that leaks backward into our present. When God prepares something there, He prepares strength here." Sometimes the miracle is hearing restored. Sometimes it's hope restored. After the benediction, Ethan meant to slip out unnoticed. But the busker from the park was suddenly in front of him, grinning. Up close, he was younger than Ethan had guessed. He tapped his chest, then signed his name, Micah. Ethan fingerspelled his own name slowly, clumsy as a toddler. Micah laughed gently and signed. First time, Ethan nodded. Micah pointed to the card in Ethan's hand. The program man traced the verse number in the air again, eyebrows lifted in question. Ethan pulled out his phone. He typed, "I knew this verse from before. I hated it." Tonight it felt different. Micah read and nodded. He typed back, "We don't get less human after loss, we get more honest. Honesty is a good place to meet God." They went for tea. Micah's phone became their bridge. He told Ethan about losing hearing at 12 after a fever, about anger that made him sharp, about the first time he felt a worship song in his feet and knew it wasn't over. He typed, "I thought God was punishing me, but what if he was preparing me? Not to speak like before, but to speak a language someone else needed to hear." Ethan looked at his hands and wondered what language he had yet to learn. He started returning to Cornerstone on Sunday nights. He learned a few signs, then a few more. His mother came with him once, crying softly through worship while her hands tried to mimic the choir's movements. In the deaf fellowship after service, Ethan discovered a room where eye contact felt like hospitality and where silence wasn't absence, but a different kind of presence. People told stories with eyebrows and laughter like ripples. He found himself laughing, too, without sound. Yes, but not without joy. One evening, Micah asked if he'd help record a video. "Our church is telling resurrection stories for Easter." He typed, "Would you tell yours?" Ethan hesitated. "I'm not resurrected." He typed back, "I'm still." This, Micah's hands moved quick, his face gentle. "Resurrection in denial of wounds," he signed. "It's a savior who keeps his scars." They filmed in the sanctuary after hours. The camera's red light blinked like a heartbeat as Ethan signed slowly, pausing to spell the words he didn't know. After the accident, his hands said, "I believed I was a broken instrument. Now I'm learning I'm a different instrument." He took the card from his pocket and held it up for the lens, the verse he had once resented. "I can't hear like before," he signed, "but I can feel the music in my bones. And sometimes the music feels like God's promise walking through the door early." When the video posted, strangers messaged to say thank you. A girl in Brazil wrote, "I thought God forgot my language." A grandfather in Ohio wrote, "I haven't been to church since my wife died. I'm going this Sunday." She loved that verse. Ethan read each message and felt the strange mercy of purpose finding him like sunlight through a stubborn cloud. And yet, not every day was brave. Some mornings, he woke to the weight of silence and wore it like a wet coat. He missed the casual way people spoke over coffee, missed knowing when someone said his name softly. He missed drums that lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. He wanted to be healed, and he wanted to be okay if he wasn't. And some days holding both wants felt like standing on a bridge when the river swells. On one of those weary days, Micah invited him to the hospital to visit a teenager named Lilo, who'd lost hearing after an infection. Her mom asked for someone who understands. He typed, "Come with me." In the room, Lila's hair was a dark waterfall across the pillow. Her eyes held the wide, wild look of someone just told the map has changed. Micah introduced Ethan with a gentle wave. Lila barely glanced up. Ethan pulled a chair close. He signed slowly, "I'm new at this," and grinned, making a joke of his clumsy hands. "I break grammar rules." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He told her hands forming, pausing, trying again about the floor that vibrates with worship, about the first time his mother signed "I love you" and the shape actually fit. He told her that he still gets mad, and that God has survived his anger with no sign of bruising. Finally, he signed a verse number on the card and set it in her palm. She frowned at it, then back at him. He pointed to his chest, then lifted his hand toward the ceiling, a small motion like releasing a balloon. Her eyes softened. She tapped the card and nodded. When they left, Ethan stepped into the winter sun and the world went silent. Yes, but somehow less empty. He realized he'd been waiting for heaven to fix what he lost. Maybe heaven, like Micah said, was preparing him to find what was still here. On Easter Sunday, the sanctuary pulsed with bodies and color. The choir signed with a kind of holy mischief, and the captions ran across the screen like a river. The pastor spoke of the risen Jesus and Thomas touching scars, John 20, and how the proof of resurrection wasn't the absence of wounds, but the presence of life moving right through them. Then the band began a song that Ethan used to mix for a band he loved. Is he worthy? The congregation answered the questions in waves, a call and response that rocked the room. Ethan couldn't hear it, but he could feel the floor and see the faces, and the truth rose in him like a dawn he hadn't expected to see again. Tears stunned his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. He mouthed the words he remembered and signed the ones he knew. He thought of Leela and his mother and Micah and the girl in Brazil and the grandfather in Ohio and all the people who could not hear or could not see or could not imagine, and of the God who could and did and does. After the service, a small boy tugged Ethan's sleeve. He had the bright, serious gaze of those who ask brave questions. He signed, careful and slow. Does God talk loud? Ethan crouched to meet him eye to eye. He signed, sometimes he whispers into your bones. The boy nodded like this made sense and dashed off. That night, back in his apartment, Ethan took the last vinyl he had been able to sell, a record he and his father used to listen to on Sunday afternoons, the needle dropping like a promise. He placed it on the turntable and set the needle down. He couldn't hear what came, but he laid his palm on the cabinet and felt the faint vibration hum against his skin. He closed his eyes. The room was quiet, but not empty. The silence wasn't an erasure anymore. It was a canvas, a place God could write on. He thought about the verse card now soft at the edges, about how the words had refused to be an insult and had become an invitation. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart has imagined. He had always read it as a closed door. You won't get it. Tonight it felt like an open one. You can trust me. He turned off the lamp and the apartment held its breath. Somewhere outside, a neighbor laughed, a dog barked, a siren threaded the distance, all hints and shapes he couldn't catch. But he felt another kind of nearness, the person shaped like the pastor had once mentioned when talking about Revelation's city with no need of sun, because God himself is its light. He didn't need to understand it perfectly to lean toward it. Thank you, he signed into the darkness, the gesture small and sincere, like setting a candle in a window you hope someone will see. He laid down, the quiet soft now, and let himself imagine the day when all of this would be sound again, when every word and tear and silence would be gathered up into a song sung without fear, when eyes would see, ears would hear, and hearts would finally catch up to what God had been preparing all along. He smiled. Hope can be loud even in a silent room. Share and comment this if you believe God still writes the best stories.